That's the first thing I wondered when we get down there. Is someone going to have the courage to say that to a Canadian? And they did. We went to the board meeting first thing in the morning, and we had tables set up to watch that board meeting. And we had three people at our table kind of joke, "Oh, you're from Canada. Oh, you're from our 51st state." And, you can react and you can say, "That's a load of crap," or, think what you will. But, my response was simply to smile and tilt my head a little bit.
Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Last week, municipal leaders from Nova Scotia, Ontario, and Quebec traveled to Washington, D.C. to take part in the National League of Cities Conference on behalf of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Their mission? To strengthen relationships and push back against the ongoing trade escalations between Canada and the United States. Disputes that have real world consequences for local economies, local businesses, and yes, local jobs. Among the Canadian delegation was Mayor Pam Mood, president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, who took the opportunity to deliver a clear message to U.S. officials and municipal counterparts. But what was the response? What did she hear from American leaders? And what impact could this growing tension have on local communities here in Canada? Also, in Washington, President Mood also sat in on a speech from U.S. Vice President JD Vance, where he outlined the administration's stance on trade and local governments. What did he have to say? And what does it mean for Canadian municipalities now? We caught up with President Mood to discuss her key takeaways from the trip and what comes next. President Mood, thank you so much for sitting down with me right off of your recent trip to Washington, D.C., where you spoke to municipal leaders from across the United States. What did you hear as you have officially come back and landed in Nova Scotia?
What did I hear? Well, the first thing I heard was a lot of apologies. And I think that's important to note. I think that folks over there are starting to see, the repercussions, especially with municipal leaders, repercussions on the ground. That's where we do most of our work. So lots of apologies, lots of eye-opening over there as well, as we shared our message about those repercussions of tariffs. So yeah, it was really interesting.
You talk about the apologies, but you also brought down a message in the delegation that was led by Tim Tierney, the first vice president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and yourself. And I forget the gentleman's name, but he's a mayor from Quebec, and you'll probably just tell me in about 2 seconds. But was the discussions that you had in Washington productive? Because there's a sense that maybe municipalities may not be talking about tariffs down in the States. Did you get a sense that they wanted to talk about the tariffs and how it would impact both Canada and the United States?
So that's a mixed question, and a mixed answer. They absolutely want to talk about it. I think that some didn't feel 100% free to do so. They are in the midst, as we are, it's budgeting season, as we know locally. And so what happens if you speak out publicly and vocally against the administration down there? Does your funding disappear? So a little bit of fear and angst around that, of course. But otherwise, they just no different from us here in Canada. We're on the ground as local officials, and they just need to know this is going to hurt us both. How is it going to harm our constituents? So I believe, regardless, except, there may have been a few, and there always are, that just don't want to hear the message. I didn't feel that, but I'm sure they were in the room because that's just normal. But they took the message. I think you could see it almost, calculating in the brain. Oh my gosh, this is really going to affect our folks on the ground. And it doesn't matter which way the tariffs are running. It doesn't matter if it's us in retaliation or theirs that came first. It's simply going to affect us all.
You you traveled to Washington at a kind of a challenging time because last week there was tariffs and then there wasn't tariffs and then there was reciprocal tariffs and then there was a talk about electricity tariffs from Ontario. The uncertainty has caused a lot of municipalities here in Canada to try to figure out what's going on down in the States. When you were there, basically living the complete sort of roller coaster that municipalities have been on here in Canada, did you get a sense that the American stakeholders, the American counterparts that you spoke to, are in the exact same position where that roller coaster of we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, let alone 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think so. I think on the ground here, of course, and because we were invited by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, we did a deeper dive, of course. I did, in speaking with the officials down there, I did say, we've got 1,000 things on our plates on any given day. Is the tariff, kind of thought of as a high level? And then when you get down provincially here and statewise there, and then come down to the local level, is it more real? And I was feeling that, they want to talk about it. It honestly, it was like a game of Olympic ping pong. I had to ask my team every day, where are we? What is Trump saying? What's Ford saying? I keep up with what our premier is saying, obviously. I mean, because I do want to follow the same message. He's sent a strong message, as the majority of premiers have, as well as the federal government. But they wanted to hear the answers, and they're feeling like they don't, are we talking about it or not? Because we don't know, are they on or are they not? So it's really difficult. The other piece to that is, on or off, you better darn well be ready, because if it's going to affect the people, there's no sense, we had to be reactive in this situation, because it was like, oh, no, you just didn't do that to your best friends and neighbors and allies. But they did. I shouldn't say they did, he did. And, now we need to be proactive in figuring out, what are the next steps, and keeping on message and letting them know.
We over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of talk about the tariffs that are coming in from the United States on a 25% tariff on all goods going from Canada into the United States. But there's also another deadline that's coming up here soon. And I know this doesn't have to do with your recent trip to Washington, but it is an impactful tariff that could decimate the seafood industry in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada. And that is the tariffs that could be potentially coming from China onto Nova Scotia and Canadian seafood and canola. While the conversations in Washington were mostly about Trump, I would assume, did you have conversations with anyone about what's going on with the Chinese tariffs that are coming down on March 20th?
They were mentioned, but we didn't talk in detail. We had a very busy schedule, and the focus while we were there, of course, was on the US-Canada relationship and the tariff piece there. Back home, though, those conversations are coming up every day. Are you visiting China? I don't think I'm heading to China anytime soon, but, I know that our provincial government has certainly, been working on this type of issue, and we just have to see what happens. And again, we have to be proactive in that. So we're going to leave that piece to the feds and the province, and if we need to hop on, then absolutely do so if they need that. I'm in Yarmouth. I'm in Nova Scotia, so the seafood industry here is the mainstay of what we do. So, tremendously difficult. My son is actually, I just hopped on a session that he did a couple days ago. He teaches at the university in Saskatchewan, and he's talking about the canola oil, and so everything is intertwined across the country, and it's important that we pay attention where we are and what's happening.
Going back to your trip to Washington, did you meet with both Democrat and Republican mayors and council members from across the United States? Because I know some cities in the United States are nonpartisan, some are Democrat, some are Republican. Did you get a sense from those discussions with those partisan mayors, like your counterparts, that this conversation was the same around these tariffs, or did you have one conversation with Democrat leaders and one conversation with Republican leaders, and then also nonpartisan leaders as well?
So we did reach out to both the Democratic Mayors Association and the Republican Association. We did meet with the Democratic uh, group. The Republicans said they'd get back to us, but they didn't. They must have been busy or something. So in the room itself, in the conference itself, of course, both are represented. I couldn't tell you numbers in our groups that we spoke to. So I did a session with finance, intermunicipal, intergovernmental agency, and you could tell which one was Democrat heavy, which one was Republican heavy. It was a little bit eye-opening as well. Tim Tierney is our first vice president of FCM. He did the session with economic development, and more open, more willing to hear the message, very engaging. And mine was too, but you could feel it in the air, which party they were with. The general conference, of course, was everyone was in that room. So yeah, they all heard a little bit of the message.
What do you bring back from this convention? Because there might be some people who might be listening to this who go, why was President Mood down there? Why was the mayor of Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, down in Washington, D.C.? Why was it important for yourself, for the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, for Nova Scotia to have a representative down in Washington during these, like I said beforehand, roller coaster of times that we are in, where we don't know what the next 10 minutes is going to bring?
So what a great and fair question. I think we would all agree, whether you're elected or not, if you're a citizen or a business, we know what happens more quickly across wanting to get things done. If the people at the local level hear it, they're the ones that scream the loudest. So, our prime minister gave an amazing message. It was powerful. It was heartfelt. It was, well done. And I can only speak to my premier, but he did the same thing, a powerful, thoughtful, and you know what? He's going to look after Nova Scotia. And good on him for actually saying that. At the local level, we did go on a diplomatic mission, and we were diplomatic, but we were saying, at a local level, this is where it happens. When the people understand what's going on and that it's going to impact everything from the price of homes being built. Look at what just happened in California. And their softwood lumber would come from us because it's denser. I mean, I know the president is saying we don't need their lumber. Well, okay, then you can use your own, which is not as dense as ours. So those types of things, once folks realize the automotive industry, they go back and forth across borders. So, 6 or 7 times it's going to get tariffed. Let's call it a tax. You're going to pay thousands more for a vehicle. That impacts you. So, once they understand, that's why it's important for us to be there, because the federal government and the province will do their work, our premier with the state officials, and we do ours with the local officials. And there are many more of ours. They're on the ground. They're giving those messages to their people who, are they going to rebel? Are they going to rise up when they realize what's going on? So I think 3 levels of government doing the same thing, tremendously important that we're in this together.
Now, I should just clarify. I'm assuming you meant former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's speech, because as of recording, we just swore in the 24th Prime Minister. So I just want to make sure. Were you talking about Mark Carney, or were we talking about the former Prime Minister?
Yep, I'm talking about Justin Trudeau when he
Okay,
was
perfect.
prime minister just a couple days ago. But the messaging that I
Yeah.
heard was when he was prime minister.
Do you think you were heard? Because I think that's the biggest thing with these trade missions or these delegations going down to the United States. And I've asked Neil Como, the FCM Rural Forum Chair. I've asked Kathy Valentino, the second Vice President, and they all seem like they feel like they've been heard. For you, as the mayor, as the president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, do you feel like you were truly heard and they understand? And by them, I mean the U.S. counterparts understand that what's good for Canada is good for the United States, and this trade war is not good for either one of us.
Yeah, I feel that we were heard. Um, Absolutely. It doesn't mean, as I've said before, it doesn't mean everyone's going to agree with it or capture everything we're trying to say, but they understand where we're coming from. And, you cannot, I don't care where you're elected from, which side of the border, you can't ignore that the people that voted for you are going to be affected. And if you can ignore that, then you shouldn't be in the seat in the first place. Let's just be blunt about it. If you don't care about the people, get the heck out of the way and let somebody else that does fill in that seat. And also match with that, as I've mentioned, that bit of fear. The Democrats are not afraid to speak out because they're really upset. They're really listening. How do we fight this? The Republicans just were kind of quietly saying, not all of them, but we're really sorry because they didn't sign up for this. I don't think anybody signed up for this, to hurt your neighbors, your friends, your allies. We say, we love Americans. We always have, we always will. It's not about them. It's about one person trying to make some changes that just don't make sense to any of us. The very least that will happen is that they will give it some thought and start to look into it deeper themselves and find out what the facts are, if they're listening to the right people. Is
What do
that
you take?
fair?
What do you take away from this experience? Because you come back to Nova Scotia. You landed, I think, 2 days ago, if not today, from recording this. But what do you do with the information you've gathered now? Is it disseminated across municipalities in Nova Scotia? Is it reaching out to the people you connect it with while in Washington? What are the steps that you as president, you as mayor, you as a board member of FCM do with the information you've gleaned from your US counterparts?
So that is purely and simply from my perspective, what else does FCM need us to do? In listening to the folks that we did visit and did have a chance to chat with, and that's everyone from the embassy to the Democratic Mayors Association. We've met with the president of the National Mayors, lots of meetings taking place, and we didn't just share the information. We said, what's next? How can we help, move this tariff situation, if you want to call it that? How do we move that forward? How do we make changes? And again, in keeping with the federal government and the provincial governments, because they're doing some great work. We just have to get word out and help folks understand this is what's going on. So FCM will prepare a plan. I can say they are so great at putting things together and figuring out what has to be done. And we'll just hop on board and whoop, whoop, get her done.
So you talk about who you met, and I'm going to play a little bit of geography test in my mind here for a second. But did you happen to speak to any mayor or elected official from Maine, from Rhode Island, from Vermont, from New Hampshire, Connecticut? Because those are relatively close to Nova Scotia. I know you do have a ferry access from Nova Scotia to Maine. So did you speak to anyone from the New England part of the United States and try to find similarities, whether it be that seafood tariffs that could be potentially put on from Canada? So, did you have any conversations with anyone in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, we did. I mean, everyone there, with one end of US to the other. I know for certain we had a shout out from Michigan, which is still close, and it's are you really going to shut our power off? If we have to, if we have to. But you're bang on, and it depends where you are in Canada. So the Marc Doré, um, he's the mayor of Dorval, so that's right outside of Montreal. I'll be there. I'm actually leaving tomorrow, and I'll be there for a week doing some work. And his issues are different, and Ottawa's are a little bit different. And ours certainly, we connected with the possible tariffs around the fishery. Tourism was a huge, huge discussion. I mean, I'm in a small town, but the impact of tourism on us, that's our second industry next to the fishery. So we've got that ferry, international ferry coming back and forth. We were pretty blunt about saying, especially here, our dollar matched with the fact that, people just want to get out, regardless of what they believe, they want to get out of that political messiness that's happening there. They just want to rest from everything. And so, they come to Canada, hop on the ferry, come say hello to Mayor Mood in Yarmouth. I'll make you a cup of coffee, show you around, cook you up some good lobster that you've probably tasted because, Yarmouth lobster or Maine lobster.
They certainly are.
It's called a Maine lobster. I think they're ours. But yeah.
One of the big events that transpired during your recent trip to Washington was Vice President JD Vance spoke at the NLC convention, and this was the first time speaking to an American audience. He had been to Europe, but this was the first time him giving a speech to American since taking office in January. From an outsider's perspective, you were in that room. I watched it online. There was a contentious part. But did you get a sense that the mayors were on board with the message that he was giving, or there was some apprehensiveness around it?
I got the apprehensiveness. So I was sitting, I want to say about a third of the way back, probably not even that. And I'm going to be honest. I went into that, I had folks back home saying, Mayor, don't go in that room. You're Canadian, you shouldn't be in there. And I disagree. I think we need to listen to people, see where they're coming from. But I wanted particularly to get a feel for the room. So it's exactly the question you're asking. What was that feel? I don't think the support was there when he started to speak, and he was shining a beautiful light on the work that local governments do. That was wonderful. That got some applause. Nobody went crazy. The room wasn't even full to capacity, which we were led to believe it would, but it wasn't.
It looked that way from social media. It looked that way on social media. So
it did. And it's funny because my colleagues were sitting quite far up front, and they said, boy, we could just hear the cheers. And I said, it's funny because we were sitting a third of the way back and all we heard were the boos. So, load up. I don't know how they do it, but it can be done. Fix, make sure the audience is right for the person speaking. And then very quickly after that, chat about housing, and the housing piece is hugely important to both countries. I mean, we have unhoused people and everything that goes with that. But forgetting to say, these tariffs are going to add another 21,000 on top of that, or any type of costs. And I did listen to the mayor of West Hollywood. She was lovely. And, that whole story around the wildfires out there, we've all seen that. They have to rebuild. And if their, forestry is coming from us, their softwood lumber, like, what are they going to do? Like, that's just going to cost more money. The third thing he talked about, which kind of made me smile and put my head down was, start out with how great municipal work is and how important. And then the last message was this administration has put forward, rules, regulation, legislation, and you don't get to choose which ones you want to implement. You will implement them all. And to me, I'm like, whoa. If my premier or PM said that, I'd say, is that a threat? And there were some people that came up after and literally said, I feel like I got threatened to either follow suit or look out. And maybe that wasn't the case, but it sounded like that to some folks that were chatting with us after.
Now, I'm going to ask the very, very political question here, and I apologize if it comes out of left field, but I feel like you and I have a good repertoire, and it's not out of malice, but it's out of true trying to understand. There has been a lot of talk, and I say a lot of talk from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue of Canada becoming the 51st state, joining the states, this tariff war being an economic driver to have Canada join the United States. On the ground, when you were speaking to mayors, did this come up at all in any of your conversations about, yes, we want Canada, or we don't know where this is coming from because no mayor wants it? What was the reaction from what your conversations were like with US mayors?
That's the first thing I wondered when we get down there, is someone going to have the courage to say that to a Canadian? And they did. We went to the board meeting first thing in the morning, and we had tables set up to watch that board meeting. And we had three people at our table kind of joke, oh, you're from Canada. Oh, you're from our 51st state. And, you can react and you can say, that's a load of crap, or, think what you will. But, my response was simply to smile and tilt my head a little bit. And as soon as you do that, I think I know what my message was, and it was simply, that's not going to happen. And why would you say something that ridiculous? Even though, in fairness, Chris, I felt like, they're trying to be funny. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable with your neighbors, the people in the country closest to you. That's horrific. It never should be that case. And then that was quickly followed by, I know, we don't know where that came from. It's so ridiculous. We can't even imagine. Who would say that? So they were joking. They're not getting a reaction from us because we're just not giving it. And then followed by, not apologies, but, basically saying they think it's ridiculous too. And then, we can laugh all we want, but that man is hell bent on saying something and making it happen. So, we just have to stand up, and you know what it is. Let's do elbows up, or I'd like my elbows to be, but elbows up, and we need to be tough on this. And I'm loving what our leaders in the other levels of government are doing. Like, they're standing firm and saying, here are the facts. So back off.
Before I let you
Well,
go, I have two last questions for you. We talked about, was it a successful trip? Do you feel like you've been heard? Would you do it again? And what would you do differently this time if you went down there?
I think, I would do it again. Absolutely. I'm a huge believer in, if you have the capacity and the ability to do something to help your country and help other countries, yes, you have to do that. This comes right down to, helping the people on the ground right outside of town hall here in Yarmouth. So yes, I'm 1,000% in. What would I do differently? I don't know that I do anything differently, except if I went again following this, I would ask the questions of the people. What do you understand about tariffs, and how are they going to affect your people? So instead of an awareness campaign, I'd want to know, did you hear me? Are you aware? And then start the conversation from there, because I still feel like they just don't understand how it's going to hit locally. And that's where the danger is.
Last time I had you on the show, I asked you a very poignant question, and you said, why'd you ask me that, Chris? But I'm going to ask it again. But I'm going to ask it in the context of what's going on globally. Are municipalities going to be better off in a few months after this dies down, or do you think that this next 4 years are going to be as turbulent as they have been for the first 2 months of this Trump second administration?
Ooh, Chris, why did you ask me that question? I think it depends what happens, first of all. I think we're already a little better off in some ways because you know what? We are so supporting each other here in Nova Scotia. We've got local Nova Scotia campaigns where the liquor's off the shelves from the Americans. We don't have any American alcohol on our shelves, and we like our beer. And so we're learning to be self-sufficient, but more so we're learning, we need to look after each other. And it's so important that we do that regardless of the circumstances. The bad news would be that, do we lose some businesses and some industries? Are the tariffs going to cause things to, go too high? Is it going to hit our people too hard? So it's a mixed bag, but I'm just thankful that, I think Kretjen said, give the president a medal because he's united us like never before. And our premier's doing that, and we're trying to do that on the ground as well. Let's come together and figure out who in the heck we are. So if this happens again, or if it continues, we're a little bit more ready than we were the last time.
President Mood, I think that's the best way to end this interview. Thank you so much for sitting down with me after your recent trip to Washington. Again, I feel like this is not going to be the only conversation we have in the next few months, but I appreciate you taking time to do this. So thank you so much.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we hope you enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights from President Mood on her most recent travels to Washington, D.C. Now, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform or here on YouTube if you're watching it. And give us a subscribe on any of the social media platforms at Cross Border Network. To learn more about the guests and the communities that we feature on this show and all the other shows that we have in our repertoire, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to share this episode with your friends, your family, and your community. It helps get the word out, and if you can, leave us a review. It helps us get the message out even more. So, until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs tomorrow. Till then, everyone.